Jaylon Johnson's season is essentially over, and it feels like Ryan Poles didn't do enough to prepare the Chicago Bears for this possibility.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On the show today, we're taking a closer look at the impact of Jaylon Johnson's injury, and what that leaves the Bears at cornerback, highlighting some lack of depth there that maybe they should have seen coming and been a little bit more proactive in trying to prepare for. We'll look at what their existing options might be to still add from outside of the roster to bolster that cornerback group. And then we got to wrap up with some comments from Ben Johnson on Monday that seem to be calling out DJ Moore, not by name, but seems like he's kind of talking around who the culprit might be there, but really sending a message to all the receivers to shape up or get out of the way. But first, we have to deal with a massive injury in the Chicago Bears secondary. We saw Jaylon Johnson go down against the Detroit Lions. He was initially questionable, I think, and then ruled out. And then Ben Johnson said after the game that they thought it was likely a re-aggravation of the groin injury. Now, it sounds like it's not exactly that, but it is in the groin area. And most importantly, we know that he is out indefinitely. And the reporting now is that he could miss all of the regular season. That, I think Jordan Schultz was the one who said he will likely miss the rest of the regular season with a groin injury that will require surgery. Now, there's an outside chance he could return late in the season if the Bears are in contention. But I think for all intents and purposes, Jaylon Johnson is out for the season. He's going on injured reserve. Maybe there's a slight chance you can get him back for the last game or two, or heaven forbid the playoffs, if that's somehow in the conversation. But I think from a functional planning purposes, we can assume he's gone. 2026 is when Jaylon Johnson will be back. And it leaves the Bears in a really tough spot at cornerback, where your depth is now exposed. It felt like entering the regular season, it was like, well, Jaylon Johnson will be back. So if you have to have one or two games of Tyreek Stevenson and Nahshon Wright as your outside cornerbacks, you can survive for a game or two there, especially with Kyler Gordon in the slot, right? But then in the lead up to the regular season, Kyler Gordon now week to week with his injuries. Now you've got a backup in the slot and a backup on the outside. And all of a sudden, your cornerback room in particular looks rough. Because now it's, Nahshon Wright and Tyreek Stevenson are going to be on the outside. Right now, Nick McLeod is your starting slot cornerback. And then Jaylon Jones, who you brought in off of waivers at the end of the preseason, is probably your top backup outside cornerback. Although Nick McLeod can play outside too, so they might think of McLeod as the next backup outside cornerback. And then you could bring in Josh Blackwell in the slot to replace McLeod if you move around. But nonetheless, none of those are names you really like having starting in your secondary. And that's the thing. It's not just one of the names. You can get by if, say, Tyreek Stevenson is your worst corner because you got Jaylon and Kyler Gordon and you feel like Brisker's playing well and maybe Kevin Byard can get back to playing well. Okay, if you have one weakness at one cornerback spot on the outside, sure, it's going to cause some problems, but you can survive and you can get by. But it feels like the cornerback group that's facing Dallas this week and that honestly faced the Lions for the second half of the season is there's not even really a strength, and now with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb on the schedule, who's covering CeeDee Lamb? Is it Tyreek Stevenson, who's giving up a perfect passer rating in coverage, or Nashawn Wright, who has a pick 6 but has also given up some big plays and missed a bunch of tackles so far? There's just not a good option here, and it feels like something that, not that it should have been totally predictable, but that Ryan Poles maybe should have been more proactive about. Because, well, you're never counting on your two best cornerbacks being hurt at the same time. And not that you have to be prepared for a serious injury at all times to your best players. But when Jaylon Johnson starts training camp and preseason on the non-football injury list, and we know now that he had some kind of like abdominal like muscle in the groin, like come off the bone a little bit, it sounds like. When you know a player is recovering from a groin injury like this and misses all of training camp and the preseason, it's not that Ryan Poles should expect that Johnson will then miss the entirety of the season, but perhaps you would imagine that if there was a player dealing with a soft tissue injury that could lead to additional injuries, maybe not even necessarily the same injury re-injured, which it sounds like this might be also groin, but not the exact same injury. But I could imagine, and I'm not a doctor, so I can't speculate too strongly on this, but you could imagine that there's some compensating from some muscles over other muscles when one muscle is weak and recovering, and you could imagine that one soft tissue injury might make you more prone to other soft tissue injuries. We see this across the NFL. Guys that are dealing with these nagging kind of things never quite go away. And so, I don't blame Poles for not predicting a season-ending injury to Jaylon Johnson. All throughout this process, when Jaylon Johnson's hurt, and then Kyler Gordon's hurt, and Josh Blackwell was hurt in this process, they never made a cornerback addition. Now, at the beginning of training camp, they signed Trey Flowers as a veteran free agent, but Trey Flowers is gone. They had him on the practice squad at first and then cut him from the practice squad. So they have two corners on the practice squad. We'll talk about what their options might be coming up here in a moment, but we never saw them go and make any other additions at cornerback after trying out Trey Flowers. And that was while we saw Nashawn Wright play up and down, while we saw Tyreek Stevenson play up and down. You would have thought when Jaylon Johnson's not back for week 1 and Kyler Gordon gets hurt, that they go out and add another cornerback. And to be fair, they claimed Jaylon Jones on waivers. I guess that's sort of adding another cornerback, but we know Jaylon Jones is a little bit more of a special teams type of player. And they also had kept a couple of other guys around in that mix for that conversation to potentially make that 53-man roster that then, Terrell Smith goes in injured reserve and Zay Frazier goes in injured reserve and Jaylon Johnson is the only answer. You've got two guys out, two corners on injured reserve, Jaylon Johnson about to go on injured reserve, and Kyler Gordon missing multiple weeks. And throughout that process, there was never a sense of urgency to go add a little bit more cornerback depth. And it's easy to just say, well, hey, get better players because, there's not always great options out there. But it just feels like a spot where just to have another person in the building or on the practice squad or somewhere just in case, to feel like you could go to somebody in case Jaylon Johnson has another injury setback or in case, if Tyreek Stevenson or Nashawn Wright gets hurt, then what are you going to do? They just don't really have a lot of depth and a lot of answers here. Not that there's a perfect solution sitting out there that would make you feel great about where the team is now, but it would just have been nice to have been preparing for this, to have somebody who would be in the building learning the defense already so that they're not showing up now on Tuesday. I'm assuming the Bears are going to place Jaylon Johnson on injured reserve today as this podcast comes out and probably sign a cornerback. And now they've got 5 days to learn the defense and get ready to play against Dallas, as opposed to having somebody who has been around the organization for a few weeks, learning the defense and getting up to speed and can be a little bit more prepared to fill in. So we'll take a look at what some of those options might be, including some veteran free agents, some guys on other practice squads, and who's on the Chicago Bears' own practice squad next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. Mazda brings all the same intention and attention to detail to how they craft every model. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but. from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season, especially these Midwest winters. You can trust yourself behind the wheel of a Mazda. So like the players, Mazda sweats every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Locked On Bears is also brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you end up leaving money on the table. And that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. I've got the Monarch Money app on my phone, and it's great because it does all the heavy lifting for me. I can link all my accounts in minutes so then I can see clear data visuals and get smart categorization of my spending. It just helps me finally feel in control of my money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Instead of having to log into 5 different apps and 5 different accounts to check in my financial picture, it's all in one place with Monarch Money. And it has helped me really identify areas where I didn't realize I was spending so much, going out, having fun with friends on the weekends and dining out a little bit too much too. But with Monarch Money, I've got it under control. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first 12 months at Monarch Money with promo code LOCKEDONNFL. So Jaylon Johnson is out. That's the reality. Nothing we can do about it. Roster spot certainly will be created when he goes on injured reserve. And I would imagine the Bears will use that on a cornerback to fill in some more depth there. I don't suspect that Ryan Poles is going to go out there and necessarily try and break the bank for a new starting corner to bench Nahshon Wright or Tyreek Stevenson. But there are some options out there if they just feel like, okay, without Jaylon Johnson, we got to go a little bit more nuclear here. But I think more likely is probably a backup type of player or a veteran who has some experience but can start out on the bench, and you don't have to instantly promise them a starting job the moment they walk in the door. Because there's a couple of guys like that I think instantly right away Chicago Bears fans are going to go straight to. The biggest name free agent cornerback is, of course, Asante Samuel Jr., formerly of the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, a very high draft pick, and the NFL pedigree is obviously there from his father, Asante Samuel. But as a second-round pick in 2021, everyone's kind of wondering where Asante Samuel Jr. is going to end up. The problem is he had neck surgery this offseason, some sort of like fusion treatment in his neck, which is always scary. I don't know what that means, but it sounds scary and sounds like something that, you'd want to be cautious about. And Asante Samuel Jr. is, the last update on his health is that he is scheduled to have a CT scan in October to check on the recovery there. And if that all goes well, then he'll be ready to sign with the team for the second half of this regular season. So even if the Bears are legitimately interested in Asante Samuel, which I'm guessing they're not, but you're still, what is that? 4 or 5 weeks of the NFL season away from the middle of the season. I mean, we don't know exactly when in October the CT scan is, but like it might be, week 9, week 10 is November 2nd, November 9th before somebody like Asante Samuel could get up to speed. So you have, up until that point, 5 games plus a bye week before anything that. So I think if the Bears are going to make a move for Jaylon Johnson, right, it's probably not going to be the Asante Samuel patience approach there. If they want to get that instant replacement starter, maybe the option is James Bradberry. Also an injury situation to monitor, but it wouldn't surprise me if they bring him in for a workout just to kind of check in on how he's doing. Because Bradberry he was a starter for the Philadelphia Eagles for a number of years in some of those good defenses in recent memory, and then he spent a little bit of time with the Carolina Panthers. I have that backwards. Sorry, he started with the Carolina Panthers, but then was on the Philadelphia Eagles the last couple of seasons, 2022 and 2023. Tore his Achilles in 2024. So that's obviously a big problem. He was with the Giants in between there, but this is a guy who started 125 games in his NFL career. He is a bona fide starting caliber cornerback here. He's 32 though, and coming off a torn ACL, you're not necessarily expecting him to be at the Pro Bowl level he was back in, 2020 with the New York Giants there. So we're not talking about stud options. There's no great option sitting in free agency. If they were, they would already be signed. But he could potentially, if healthy and still have some in the tank, could he be better than what we've seen from Nahshon Wright and Tyreek Stevenson? I certainly don't think that's out of the question. More likely, the Bears go to a guy on a team's practice squad, sign him to your active roster, and make him a backup for now, and see how Stevenson and Wright do for a couple more weeks. And then if they get absolutely torched against Dallas, then maybe you start to consider a rotation or a competition or a potential change there to the starting lineup. And I think there's a few different practice squad options. We'll start with the Bears practice squad options. They released Trey Flowers from the practice squad, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, but they replaced him with another Flowers, Dallas Flowers, I believe, Dallis. Dallas Flowers was the replacement there. A much less experienced cornerback, which is an interesting choice there. But he had been an undrafted free agent for the Indianapolis Colts, who during his rookie season back in 2021, he led the NFL in average yards per kick return. So he's got speed and return ability, but you almost wonder, is that more of why he's on the practice squad than his actual cornerback ability? Spent 2 or 3 seasons with the Colts as a backup. Got cut last year and was on the 49ers for the preseason and training camp, but didn't make their 53-man rosters. The Bears added him to the practice squad. This is not a player who is going to step in and play meaningful defensive snaps for you right away out of the gate. He has 5 starts in his career. He started 4 games in 2023, but that's it. Had some injuries in there as well. This is not a proven player that's a massive upgrade for your position there. The other cornerback on the practice squad is a rookie who is an undrafted rookie free agent, Dante Manning from Oregon, who was with the Falcons throughout the offseason, but then waived before the start of the regular season. So your options are a special teams kick returner guy and a rookie. I just don't necessarily see the Bears seeing that as the solution, especially because both these guys just got here in the beginning of September and weren't learning this defense throughout training camp and the preseason, all that. So I would expect if they're going to bring in a cornerback, it's probably going to be somebody from outside the organization. I tried to scour every team's practice squad and some of the different veteran free agents to see if there were any connections to Dennis Allen, any former Saints in there. I couldn't find an obvious one, at least anybody that played meaningful snaps for the Saints. There were a couple guys who had a cup of coffee with the Lions, but not really, experienced, reliable players there. If I'm pulling somebody from another team's practice squad, I think the top name on my list is Dane Jackson, who's currently on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. But he was who I was mixing up with James Bradbury earlier. He spent last year with the Carolina Panthers and struggled, but before that, he had been a starter for the Buffalo Bills, and he's been a starter as an outside cornerback. He's been a starting slot cornerback. He can play inside and out and give you some positional versatility, and he's still only 28 years old. Now, he was injured last season with Carolina and missed the first half of the year on IR and then came back and struggled quite a bit, and I think that's why he hasn't signed. It's why he's been a practice squad player, not on a 53. But if I want to take my chances on a guy with some experience, but he's not super old, has been reliable in the past but had a bad year, he's definitely the guy I would prefer there. And then I can also throw in Fabian Moreau from the Minnesota Vikings practice squad. Just sort of experienced veteran player who's never been elite, but always just been really solid. Again, talking about a guy who started 55, 56 games in his career, 115 games under his belt. He's been in a bunch of different defenses before with Washington, and then they spent a year with the Falcons, a year with the Giants, a year with the Broncos, and now he's been with the Vikings the last couple of seasons. 31 years old, not a spry young guy, but just solid veteran. You know what you're getting, and it's not going to be great, but it should be a little bit more consistent than what the Bears are getting right now. That's another name I'd absolutely lean to, but any of these guys all would have to learn Dennis Allen's defense very quickly. And I'm not expecting anybody to come in and take over as a starter on Sunday against the Dallas Cowboys, but maybe you put, a Dane Jackson or a Fabian Moreau on the bench for a game or two, and then maybe after the bye week, that's when you can make a cornerback change if Nashawn Wright and Tyreek Stevenson aren't up to stuff. But in the meantime, it'll be a Nashawn Wright revenge game against the Dallas Cowboys team that drafted him and cast him off. And I don't love that matchup there, but that's likely what we're going to look ahead to as we eventually, we'll have crossover Thursday later this week and preview this Bears-Cowboys matchup. But in the meantime, I want to check in on something Ben Johnson said, where he seemed to be calling out, certainly he called out his receiver group, but when you sort of read between the lines, feels like DJ Moore is kind of the guy being called out there. So we'll take a look at what Ben Johnson said and what it means for the future of this receiving core in Chicago next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every kickoff with a can't miss offer. Because right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app, in addition to the winnings from your $5 bets. So say you want to bet on this Bears-Cowboys game coming up this weekend. Well, right now on FanDuel, the spread has the Chicago Bears as 1.5-point home favorites. The money line is Bears minus 116 if you want to pick them straight up, but they're expecting a shootout. Over under set at 50.5 points. A $5 bet on any of those or any other game or any of your other favorite sports, and you can get $300 in bonus bets just by getting that bet right. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet for your chance at $300 in bonus bets. So while cornerback injury is crisis number one right now, and defense as a whole is probably part of that, and pass rush is the Bears got a lot of things to fix. It's sort of buried within all that or underneath that, and I don't buried even a strong word because this got a little bit of attention. It wasn't like no one else noticed this. I'm not bringing this is not I'm not the only person who heard listened to Ben Johnson's press conference. I get it, but like underneath this, there's like subtly a DJ Moore something or other brewing here, and I think everyone is really quick to jump and say, "Oh, they're going to trade DJ Moore. He's gone. See ya." And I don't think it's that. I think we are too quick to assume that nothing's going to change and that the Bears aren't willing to have a little bit more patience with a star receiver like DJ Moore than they might for a, veteran minimum backup on the depth chart. But let's start by hearing what Ben Johnson said, because he didn't mention DJ Moore by name, but he also kind of unsolicited added this call out that receivers aren't all doing what they're supposed to be doing. Because I intentionally included the question at the beginning that I think it's Courtney Cronin of ESPN is asking the question, because she doesn't ask about DJ Moore at all and really isn't asking about player effort. She just was asking about, hey, Luther Bird and Colston Loveland haven't done much this season. Are they going to get a little bit more involved? And then Ben Johnson says yes, because maybe some of the other guys aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing to the level that the Bears expect them to.
Hey, Ben, I know that you've talked about with rookies needing to earn your trust in large part because they just don't have the playing experience when they're out there. But when you look at Colston, when you look at Luther, what do you think you need to do to get them more involved on offense?
Yeah, I kind of knew that first game that the tight end position wasn't going to be featured as much. I was hopeful that this game we would bounce back a little bit more, both with Cole and Colston. I think Luther's slowly gaining the trust as we go here. We're trying to get him more packages as we're going. The way that we've talked about it as a coaching staff going into this week is we're going to have a lot more competition. I've alluded to it before. Just what these guys look like when the ball's not in their hands, that's a big deal for us. And so there were some plays there yesterday that we weren't quite as pleased with what that looked like on tape. And so we're going to find out this week at practice who wants to practice hard and who wants to be a little bit more involved with the game plan here going into Sunday.
So again, to be clear, DJ Moore's name never mentioned directly in there. But I think we can read between the lines and do a little bit of a process of elimination to figure out who he might be talking about and why that's probably DJ Moore. Because the question is about Loveland and Burden, right? And so he says, there's in talking about, Burden is building that trust and going to get a bigger role, and because there's going to be more competition at receiver now, and because of X, Y, or Z, right? So he's essentially saying it's not Luther Burden. We can kind of cross that out because he wasn't saying Burden needs to be better, but he's saying that we're seeing some stuff on tape, meaning like not from Luther Burden because he hasn't been playing all that much. So if they're seeing some stuff on tape, you've really only used 3 wide receivers besides Burden this season: Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, Olamide Zaccheaus. Now, we've seen Rome Odunze put up a 7-catch, 127-yard, 2-touchdown performance. We've seen we've seen Rome Odunze consistently be the high-effort route runner who doesn't complain and doesn't have any body language issues and seems to be a consummate pro and is praised at every turn. So I think we can eliminate Rome Odunze from being in this conversation. So that leaves DJ Moore and Olamide Zaccheaus. And, well, I guess we don't know for sure from there. It could be Zaccheaus. I mean, he hasn't done a lot with the receptions he's done this season. I'm not here to say like he's been some, perfect weapon. He's gotten a lot of targets, but hasn't made a lot of specific plays, hasn't made a lot of guys miss, hasn't generated a lot of yards after catch. He's getting the ball a lot, but not necessarily doing a lot with it. But we've heard Ben Johnson praise Olamide Zaccheaus throughout training camp in the preseason as someone who picked up the offense quickly and does everything they ask of him. And he's got that rapport with Caleb Williams right away. So it would seem unlikely that it's Olamide Zaccheaus. And so if we eliminate Luther Burden, Rome Odunze, and Olamide Zaccheaus, that just leaves DJ Moore. And I think it's a very intentional call out, which is why then people say, oh no, the Bears are going to trade DJ Moore. Now Ben Johnson's called him out. DJ Moore's season's over. And it's like, no. I think we don't account for DJ Moore's ability to respond positively. I think he deserves the opportunity to do so because he's been such a productive member of multiple NFL offenses. Like, this is a 1,000-yard receiver year in and year out, give or take. I mean, he's averaging just under 1,000 yards a year for his career. Like, he has been a really, really good, successful NFL wide receiver. And so it's not as though the Bears are just going to get rid of that willy-nilly and say, all right, one strike, you're out. We're going to trade you. Like, the Bears, for as much as the Bears might be unhappy with DJ Moore, if Ben Johnson's unhappy with DJ Moore, you are worse if you get rid of DJ Moore than you are if you keep DJ Moore right now for this season. Like, DJ Moore's not going anywhere. I could certainly see his snap number come down, his targets come down, his catches come down. I don't think we're going to see him like fully benched. Like, I don't think he's going to be a healthy scratch in 2 weeks because he's not doing what the coaches want. Like, that would be a bit of a surprise to me. They are better with him on the field than with him off the field, even when he's not necessarily doing the things the coaches want. And so I think there's some give and take here where, like, yes, they do need to hold him accountable and expect more and ask more of him. And I think when the offense is clicking and when they're winning games, it's a lot easier for him to do those things. And I can see where it's human nature to say we're down 30 to the Lions. I don't really want to run this route that hard anymore. And don't get me wrong, you expect better, and it's not acceptable, but you can understand where maybe in a game like the Lions game, that might show up a little bit more. But if you're, say, beating the Minnesota Vikings for 3 quarters, might be a little bit more motivated to run hard and block hard and do everything away from the ball the way Ben Johnson talks about there. So, like, I think it's not fair for us to assume that Ben Johnson calls DJ Moore out and then DJ Moore is going to do nothing different. Like, that's not fair. I think he gets the opportunity to do things different. And I also think even if this is still a lingering problem, they probably, smooth it over for this regular season. And if they were going to eventually want to move on from DJ Moore, it's not going to be till the offseason. They're not going to make a mid-season trade away of DJ Moore. Like, unless it's a rare in-season player-for-player trade. Like, the only way you trade away DJ Moore is if you're getting a pass rusher, or I guess maybe a cornerback in this case, or a left tackle, right? Like, the only way you're trading away DJ Moore in season is if your roster gets better as a result. But you're not doing a trade deadline deal where you send DJ Moore for a draft pick and then you have a worse offense for the rest of the season. Like, that's just not what the Bears are going to do. So if they're going to move on from DJ Moore at any point, it's going to be in the offseason when you have a chance to then add more at receiver to potentially replace him. But all of that feels very premature and way too far in the future. And I still think the most likely outcome is Ben Johnson gets what he wants from DJ Moore. DJ Moore has a big season and continues as a part of this offense. I think that's most likely. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm not saying it's for sure going to happen, but most likely this is a professional NFL wide receiver. And the Bears gave him a big contract extension for a reason. Like, he's been here for a couple of years. It's not like he just showed up and now they're realizing he loafs a little bit. Like, this was known when they gave him the contract extension. I think there's a strong motivation by both sides to have this work out. And so I think generally that's still the most likely outcome. But every time Ben Johnson mentions it, it's going to perk up our ears a little bit. We're going to raise an eyebrow and say, uh-oh, what's going on there? So we'll keep tabs on what DJ Moore is doing when the ball is not in his hand right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you're looking for a second listen today, be sure to check out the Locked On NFL podcast, where this morning me and Tyler Rowland broke down all the quarterback injuries. Joe Burrow and Justin Fields and Jaden Daniels is banged up. JJ McCarthy is banged up. A lot of different quarterbacks around the NFL. We broke down those, plus the Monday Night Football games with the Bucs and the Texans and the Chargers and the Raiders. So lots of more football talk over on Locked On NFL. Comes out twice a day, again in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins taking you into barbershop. So double the NFL coverage twice a day on Locked On NFL. Just make sure you're coming back tomorrow. Make Locked On Bears your first listen again. We're going to talk about Ryan Poles and the roster construction and how much blame the general manager deserves for what's going on right now. And when you do tune in, you can be sure that each and every day you're going to get another opportunity to bear down.